Well, first of all, I want to thank the Agri-Food Net Zero Network for choosing my favourite city to have this conference in. Being influenced myself by the Smiths and New Order, what a place to have an Agri-Food Net Zero Network conference. So thank you very much for that. And I've been very lucky to collaborate with a number of people in this conference over, I would say, 15, 20 years. And it's such a pleasure when I walked in this morning to see some of my favourite people here in the conference. I've worked with a number of academics, people from the non-governmental organisation sector, and also from the private sector as well, who were also here. And it was just great to see so many people that I've been fortunate enough and lucky enough to work with. And I believe, and you'll see a theme through this presentation about the importance of collaboration, which is so important. I've been really fortunate this is my journey behind me. I've been really fortunate to follow my passion of working in food. You know, it's something that I worked in the agri-food industry for 13 years and didn't actually come into academia until 2003. And my passion for food and food systems was very much influenced initially by my grandma and granddad, who were tenant farmers, only about an hour and 30 minutes drive from here in Clitheroe, just north of Clitheroe, in a place called Sladeburn. And actually our neighbouring farmer at the time was Timothy Lang from City University. He had a sheep farm right next to our mixed farm, and I got to know Tim even when I was a teenager, and we've been great friends ever since. But what I would say, my advice to, and there's lots of early career researchers here, I've worked across that science policy boundary all my career, and policy takes place in government, in local government, in the private sector, but also in the non-governmental organisation sector. And I've made a point of working across those different boundaries, and I'm going to be talking about that today. And so don't just think of national government. That's my lesson to everybody here. You know, think of those big private companies, think of those big non-governmental organisations where you can also have an impact. And you can see here, I'm going to talk through some of this impact. I spent 5 years from 1998 to 2003, probably my favourite job, I would say, of my career, which was head of sales and marketing for Divine Fair Trade Chocolate, which is a pioneer chocolate company. And one of these pictures here is with the Cooperative Retail Group, which is based in Manchester, and we changed their policy around sourcing cocoa. So we managed to persuade the co-op, working with cocoa farmers in Ghana, to procure fair trade sourced cocoa from a cooperative in West Africa called Kwiapa Cocoa in Ghana. And they converted all their own label fair trade chocolate. And that was a piece of advocacy work, policy work, working with a big private sector retailer. And I know Sarah Wakefield's here, who was originally at the co-op and now is at Eating Better. So always a great person to work with. So enough about me. We are in an unprecedented time for food policy. It's already been mentioned by Angelina. And I guess this was sparked partly by EU exit, but also by increasing concern of the negative consequences of the food system, whether they be environmental degradation or human health. You know, this has been an unprecedented time, and it's given us academics a real opportunity to work across that science policy boundary, because there is a lack of evidence. You know, that's what we've been trying to do. That's the importance of working across that science policy boundary. Government does not have all the evidence, and it needs academics to work in partnership with government to fill those gaps in terms of evidence. And you can see here, it's been a very, very busy time in food policy making, and that busyness just increases. Angelina's already mentioned the land use framework, the agricultural roadmap, the new UK national food strategy, which, well, when I say national, actually UK-wide food strategy, which is a big improvement on the last independent review, which was just about England. So this is a real positive development. And you remember Stephen Reid announced that DEFRA and government was embarking upon a new UK food strategy back on December the 9th, 2024. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But policy has been unprecedented, not only in the United Kingdom. So if you go to the European Union, you've had the regulations to minimise global deforestation, you've had the EU biodiversity strategy, and you've also had the European Union soil strategy for 2030. So this is not only busy, this is busy transnationally across nation states. And there's a good reason for all this work is because of, and this slide I'm going to show you now is the one that keeps me awake at night. We're seeing an increasing magnitude of risks in the food system, which is impacting our societies. And these are just a few of these risks that are increasing in magnitude. You're here to talk about climate, extreme weather. You've also obviously got risks in terms of biodiversity, food insecurity, so on and so forth, biosecurity, and that's obviously linked to climate as well, and human health. So the increasing incidence of diabetes, particularly in young people, increasing incidences and rates of obesity, and increasing cost on the UK economy and the National Health Service. So this is what keeps me awake at night. That's why you're all here, I think. Amazing. These Agri-Food Network Net Zero meetings are always completely booked out. And it's an indication of the magnitude of interest in people trying to create action and solutions to transform our food system. And yeah, these are just a few. And I guess the worry for everybody who works in the food system, the worry for government, is what happens when some of these risks interact. These key risk interactions. What happens when climate interacts with geopolitical issues, with issues of cybersecurity, with issues of transport, so on and so forth. What will happen? The kind of unknown risk interactions that may occur because of this increasing magnitude of really shocks and stresses that have been around for some time in the food system. So another important lesson that I've learned over the number of decades is that policy takes place at different scales. And for some of you, this is you will obviously be well aware of this. But I've worked at different scales. So, for example, part of the FixOurFood research program, we've been working with stakeholders in Sheffield to develop a Sheffield local food action plan. And some of my colleagues are here from City University who've been very much leading this work as part of FixOurFood, working with local stakeholders to create a city-wide action plan for food transformation. And there's just been a second iteration of that work as well. We're working very, very closely with York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership and North Yorkshire Council and the new Combined Mayoral Authority to help them craft their new regional food strategy. It's really interesting that York and North Yorkshire has never had a food strategy. Unbelievable. Yet when it's really the engine room of UK food security, it's got more food and drink businesses than any other region in the United Kingdom. And different diverse landscapes, some great farmers, great food businesses, but it's never had a food strategy. So as part of the FixOurFood work, we're helping North Yorkshire do that. And then again, working with private sector businesses like the Co-op on their Future of Food strategy, working with the OECD on their food system strategy, and some of the work that we did helping Henry Dimbleby and his team with the public dialogues on the national food strategy. And so my message is that whether it's local, regional, national, international, food policy very much takes place at different scales. Can also take place at landscape scale as well, with the work of local, landscape enterprise networks also. So routes to science and policy, this is not exhaustive. This is just a kind of snapshot of some of the different ways that we as academics can influence policy, particularly at a national government level. And you can see here, often you'll see advertised on the Bravo portal, which is the civil service portal, you'll often see advertised commissions, research and development commissions by DEFRA, DWP, Department of Education, around the subject of food, school food, or food insecurity. And you've got to keep an eye on the DEFRA newsletter, comes out weekly. Got to keep an eye on the Bravo portal, which is live. If you think submitting a grant via the GES UKRI system is difficult, try submitting a grant application via the Bravo portal. It's really, really difficult. So if you do that, and you're interested in doing these research and development commissions, then give yourself more time than you would do with the UKRI submission. And you've also got, obviously, expert advice. Some of you are on scientific advisory councils in different government departments, and there's always those opportunities. The Food Standards Agency are currently looking for board members, another good opportunity to influence policy. And you've also got House of Lords commissions as well, and House of Parliament commissions, particularly from the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee. And there's one that a number of you have been involved in recently, which is the House of Lords Food, Diet and Obesity Commission, which has had quite a significant impact in government, that particular report. I think you'll see that going forward in the new UK National Food Strategy referenced quite a lot. So this is important work. And finally, particularly for early career researchers, the opportunity of parliamentary post opportunities. This is the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology. If you look on their website today, they've got a post position for an early career researcher to look into regenerative agriculture. And these are usually 3 months positions to do a kind of review, systematic literature review of a particular topic that feeds into UK parliamentary processes. So a great opportunity, and I've supervised a number of students who've been through those post positions, and you produce a really, really interesting report that gets lodged in the Parliamentary Library, which you can always refer to later. And there are other opportunities, secondments, internships. UKRI have got a set of internships with UK government, so you've got to just keep an eye on those particular opportunities. But there are, another good example, which I'll talk about later, is the UK Food Security Review, which was published 2021 and more recently in 2024, where a number of you were involved in the expert elicitation for that report. It's an official statistic. It was published on December the 11th, 2 days after the announcement by Stephen Reid that they were embarking upon a UK food strategy. Bit of a coincidence, I would say. But a number of you in the room were involved in those roundtables and those expert elicitation workshops around the 5 key themes in the UK Food Security Review report. So what I'm trying to say to you is there's so many opportunities to get involved in influencing policy and work across, get your evidence, get your work into informing UK policy, but also EU policy as well. Now, it's not only about DEFRA, and that's the other lesson that I've learned over the past number of years is that, you know, food and food policy and the food system is impacted by at least 26 government departments and agencies. This is just a snapshot of some. And this is one of the difficulties. One of the things I've really committed to in my career is to try and join up this work across the food system and bring different government departments together to talk about the problems in the food system. A good example at the moment is the Children's Wellbeing and School Bill. So I've been lucky enough to be involved in meetings with Department of Education, DWP, DEFRA, and a big part of the FixOurFood work is our work in schools, working on auto-enrolment of free school meals, working on policies around breakfast clubs in schools, and also working on early years nutrition and early years provision of food, which is even worse than it is in schools. So again, trying to get given, don't think it's a given that different government departments realise they need to talk to each other. You know, you need sometimes to be the broker that brings those different government departments together. And we're seeing this work really, I think we'll see a big difference. I think we will see some new governance in government around food systems, people from different departments joining up and talking to each other. There are some good examples internationally where this is done. And I know Corinna Hawkes at the FAO is working on this particular topic, trying to look at better governance across different nation states in terms of the food system. I better move on. So just a bit about my own personal experience working in DEFRA. I was very lucky to be part of the DEFRA food systems team. It was a new team set up by Ian Boyd, the previous chief scientist before Gideon Henderson. And basically 6 academics went in to work with 6 civil service counterparts in 2019. And before I became Dean at York, I worked in DEFRA for 2 days a week until 2022. And this is the kind of structure of the team. Some people you will know. We worked on rapid response. We worked on the National Food Strategy. We worked on the Agricultural Bill. We worked on EU exit. We worked on the pandemic. And I'll come to that in a moment. And in the same time, we were building capacity. So we ran food systems awareness courses within DEFRA and training. We got great keynote speakers to come in, people like Tim Benton, Tim Lang, Corinna Hawkes, and also people who work on systems thinking, to try and get DEFRA's structures to start working together, because government is very compartmentalised. It's a bit like universities, very compartmentalised. And you need to break down those barriers and work in an interdisciplinary way across the food system. And this network is a great example of that. I always take a food systems approach. It allows you to think of the trade-offs. It allows you to think of the win-wins, and also it means that you don't miss out any stakeholders. And I think Angelina said that. You know, justice, just transitions, disadvantage, inequality are all important, you know, areas to consider when you're taking a food systems approach. And you notice there, you've got food banking in the activities in the food system, which very rarely you see in food systems diagrams. But there are more community food locations providing community food in the UK now than UK supermarket locations. You don't see them on the high street. So it's quite, if you look at the number of locations for community food provision, it's greater than the number of locations for UK supermarkets. So it's a difficult, you know, we know it's complex. Working in the food system is very much about balancing goals and working on those trade-offs and trying to find those win-wins within food systems policy making. These are just a few. You could think of even more around tourism and other problems, but it's not easy, is it? That's why it's so interesting doing what we do across the food system. But yeah, you've got a number of different competing maybe, and what the secret is really to find those integration, those areas that climate and health, for example. Really, there are obviously some lock-ins, but there are obviously some opportunities for integration, working with schools, so on and so forth. So we developed a toolkit within the Systems Program Research Team in DEFRA, looking at different ways of researching and unpacking the food system. Here are just a number of different, you'll find this in the DEFRA Systems Toolkit, which is available online. I'm going to talk about it. You could also add, in the bottom right-hand quadrant, you could also add metric dashboards, which I know AfN Network have been working on with my own research program, FixOurFood, led by Sarah Bridle and her team. So just an example, because I'm conscious of the time, expert elicitation was one of the methods that was shown in the previous diagram. And I just show you the value of expert elicitation. In the Global Food Security Conference in Edinburgh in 2019, we had a set of roundtables to look at the methodology of the UK Food Security Review. At that time, it was very limited. And so we got a number of people here, were involved in that expert elicitation process, and we looked at different themes, different indicators. Monica's here, she was involved in that. Different indicators to develop a more comprehensive measure of UK food security, which is very much integrated into the UK Food Security Review, which is published in 2021 and 2022. So we had roundtables, spent a day at that conference, working together with industry, working together with policymakers from right across government to come up with a better methodology. This is just the map we created from the conference. So a good example of expert elicitation. Citizens' assemblies, when we designed the FixOurFood proposal, and we submitted it in, I think, May 2020. In November 2019, we had a citizens' assembly in the centre of York to discuss problems in the food system with local people. It's right in the centre of York, wasn't at the university, and another good example of a method to unpack the food system. This is an interesting one. This is a rich picture diagram. Another method that was shown on the previous slide. And this is taken from one of my Newton-funded projects, working with Chiang Mai University, which has influenced regional policy in regional government in Chiang Mai City. And this is showing from a workshop with farmers and academics and local policymakers. This is a picture of the problems in the Chiang Mai food system, mainly associated with haze. So this is haze that's created from the burning of maize, which is grown in deforested areas in northern Thailand in a kind of monoculture to feed the increasing consumption of livestock consumption in Southeast Asia. And this burning creates pollution. People originally thought it was car pollution from so many cars in Chiang Mai City, but in fact it is a problem of the food system. Creates asthma, creates problems in young people, creates problems in older people, and it just shows you by developing a rich picture diagram how you can also illustrate and unpack the problems in the food system. We had an artist who was present at the workshop who created this amazing diagram, which we've used with policymakers also. And finally, I know she's not here, Kelly Parsons, but we did a piece of work for the Food Standards Agency on trying to give academics and NGOs a roadmap on how to distill evidence to make more of a policy impact. And I'm just going to show you one example. I think Sarah was still at the Co-op at the time. We were commissioned by the Co-op retail group here in Manchester to look at their 20 key ingredients for their own branded products. Cod, dairy, cocoa, bananas, coffee, blah, blah, blah. And to look at the risks, the climate risks associated with those ingredients in the future. A team of us at the University of York worked on this, And we came up with an infographic, which is a great way. This is an example of distilling evidence, a 40-page report, into one diagram to kind of influence policymakers in a major retailer. And this is it. You'll see this in the Co-op's 2021 sustainability report on page 54 or 51, something like that. And it's been used a lot within the Co-op to illustrate to people who are managing supply chains in the Co-op, to people who are working at executive level, that some of their key ingredients are under significant risk from climate change and climate impacts. And this is an example. This is a great example of distilling all that literature down into an infographic to influence policymakers. And we presented this to the board of the Cooperative Retail Group back in 2021, and then it was featured in their sustainability report. And it's amazing how many campaign groups have used this diagram. When I say campaign groups, Co-op campaign groups, climate campaign groups, sustainable food places initiatives, to illustrate the point at their own particular meetings. You can see here, 2,100 cod disappears in the Celtic and Irish seas. Some may argue, people here may argue that's going to happen sooner rather than later. But we were using the literature that was available at the time. So just a few lessons to finish off with, because I'm conscious I want to leave time for questions, and I'm already 1 minute over, is it's very important to be a broker of knowledge, very important to collaborate with industry, with policymakers, and also with academia. And a good example of this was in the COVID pandemic, when we worked with several major retailers, several major processors, dairy processors and meat processors, and we only could work with them because of the relationships we built by the kind of knowledge brokering, to put COVID testing system in their sewage, their latrine systems in their factories. Work with Two Sisters, we work with Arla Dairy, so on and so forth. We had to talk to trade unions, we had to talk to the chief executives because of the media interest in this particular topic, and we were able to pinpoint. This is the work in DEFRA, able to pinpoint COVID by shift in those factories, in those processing plants, so we could send people home and reduce the incidence of COVID. This is what we were doing behind the scenes within DEFRA during the pandemic. But you had to know the concentration, the key meat processors, the key dairy companies, the key regional depots for the supermarkets, and we also had a testing system at the Dover-Calais port, because over 30% of our fruits and vegetables come through that one maritime choke point in the southeast of England. Be a champion for systems thinking, build capacity across the organisations that you're working with to improve their policy, frame evidence in a clear, concise way. I often work with academics who have done a policy brief and it's already 16 pages long. It has to be 1 or 2 pages, 1 page at the most. You can use both sides of the piece of paper, but it has to be a maximum 1 piece of paper. And that's just what ministers have the time to read. They want that concise overview. And be collaborative, be humble, be persistent, be pleasant. And also always follow up. If you include a stakeholder partner, government or private sector or NGO in a grant, and you don't get the grant, please tell them. Please tell them you haven't got the grant. If you want a letter of support from a policy partner, give them 3 or 4 weeks notice to, alert them early, because it has to go through lots of different processes, and thank them for it. I get so many emails from people, can you help me with some stakeholder partners? I say, when is the grant due? They say in 2 days' time. I say, don't bother. It's just not going to happen. It affects my reputation. I know it affects the reputation of the team as well. So that's a bit of a snapshot into the work that I do. And there's people here who are more adept than me at working in the policy environment, and I've learned from them. I can see them I'm looking at them now, I can see them, they do brilliant work, And all I've tried to do today is just to share some of my own experiences and some of the lessons that I've learned since over a number of years working in the private sector and also working in academia. So thank you very much, Angelina, and everybody here. Thank you. So we've got 10 minutes for questions, and there's 2 roving mics, I think. Claire's got one, and Karen's got one. And who's going to be brave enough to ask a first question? Please, go ahead. If you can say who you are and the organisation you're from, that would be great.
Good morning. Thank you. That was a really helpful presentation. I'm Leanne Sutherland from the James Hutton Institute, and I co-lead the Land Use for Net Zero Hub. I wondered, could you talk a bit about timing, so policy windows when they might be more amenable to some of the things that we have to share? Yeah,
I think that's a great question, very insightful question, because timing is very important. So you need to study. Another lesson, I guess, is the policy calendar. You need to, at the moment, the Child and Wellbeing Bill is being, going through Parliament. And I'll give you a good example. From our own practice, is that we did a lot of work early in the FixOurFood programme on holiday activity food programmes and the benefits of holiday activity food programmes. We did that we wanted to do that very, very quickly in the spring and summer of 2021 to influence the comprehensive spending budget review of the Treasury, because they were debating whether to continue after the pandemic to support the holiday activity food summer food programme. It's not only summer, it's Easter and Christmas as well. So we knew we had to do that piece of evidence gathering quickly, and we also knew we needed to book in meetings with Treasury, Department of Work and Pensions and Department of Education in the run-up, and also with SPADs and also with some think tanks in the run-up to the autumn spending review. So that's a good example where you need to know the kind of policy calendar. And so you have to keep an eye, for example, at the moment there's the UK food strategy that's being developed, and that's only just starting. The academic roundtables take place for the first events are actually the academic roundtables, and they take place next week, and a number of people in this room are invited to them. So you have to put yourself kind of forward to get involved in that. And so knowing those policy windows, obviously the land use framework, the agricultural roadmap are all another big opportunities, but try and get to find out when, and look at the Parliament kind of procedures to see what's going on. Thank you. Yes, and then we'll go here. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Isabel Fletcher. I'm from the University of Edinburgh, and I wanted to ask if you have any insight on how the UK government sees the relationship between the UK food strategy and the food strategies of the devolved nations. I need to declare an interest. I work on a project about the Good Food Nation Act in Scotland.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a difference between this government and the previous government. If you look at the previous national food strategy, independent review developed by Henry, Henry Dimbleby, he was restricted to England in his work, which I think was a bit strange, because we kind of rely very much on each other in terms of the food system. So I think you'll see a difference in that. So you'll see the industry roundtables, the academic roundtables. They've got academics from all over from right across the devolved nations. So I think that's a positive improvement in the previous, dialogues. So I'm happy about that, and I think this government recognises that, the food system is a UK food system, but it isn't only a UK food system. It's a European, it's a global food system. Thank you for that question. The lady here.
Thank you. My name is, good morning. My name is Lydia Cabral. I'm a research fellow at the Institute of Development Studies. I wanted to ask you about how you see the potential for international collaborations, learning, and also policy opportunities. I do a lot of work in Brazil, and last year the Brazilian government played a major role in launching the new G20 Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Brazil, of course, is also a well-known case for experiences like homegrown school meals that have also connection to environmental concerns. So how do you see the potential for learning from other countries and international policy spaces and new alliances emerging? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I see enormous potential. It's an excellent point. One of the things I've done since starting in my one-day-a-week secondment in DEFRA at the start of February is to reach out to, particularly initially, food and agricultural organisation. So we actually have a meeting a week today to look at different ways that best practice in how governments manage themselves in policy across the food system. Because DEFRA can't only hold all the responsibility. There has to be more cross-government working within the UK. And so we're looking at international best practice examples of how that works and see whether we can do that within the UK food system. Because as you've seen from my presentation, that, you know, there's so many different government departments and so many different agencies that impact on the UK food system. So I think we can learn a lot internationally. From best practice, and I'm really keen on bringing that learning into UK policy making. Yeah. I think, Nigel, you were first, and then this lady next. Yeah.
Who's going first?
Sorry, Nigel Scollin, Queen's University, Belfast. Thanks, Bob. You mentioned examples of cities with food policies. Are there examples that are useful of NHS units having food policies for improving health outcomes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know the guy who's the head of Net Zero at the National Health Service is a guy called Tim Radcliffe, based in Lancaster. And they use, this is a personal story, so they use Blackburn Royal Infirmary as their experimental test hospital. It's got 1,200 beds, very multi-ethnicity in terms of patients. And my dad, unfortunately, had pneumonia and sepsis last autumn, and he went in there, and we nearly lost him. And I visited that hospital a number of times. And the first thing I asked my dad, how's it going? How are you finding the hospital? He said, I won't repeat it because he sweared. But then he said, the food is amazing. And he showed me the menu, and it was all locally sourced. Well, not, you know, lots of examples of locally sourcing. In not using beef, they were using venison in the menu, so on and so forth. And he says the food is brilliant. And strangely enough, 2 weeks later, I was at a dinner, and Tim Radcliffe was on the same table as me. And I said to him, why is that hospital so amazing, the food? And he said, because we used it as our test bed for you know, achieving net zero across the NHS. And the next day, the two chefs who've won many awards for their work in public food procurement went to visit my dad at his bedside. And my dad said, you know everybody. You know, texted me, you know everybody, Bob. And but there is some pockets of real innovation and transformation going on. It's not easy. Everybody knows who works on public sector food procurement. No, it's not easy. We're doing a trial at the moment with Maintain Schools in York, where we put together a set of farmers and a set of food suppliers from our work within FixOurFood, and we're supplying on a pilot basis a number of maintained schools within York. We're trying to do it as a kind of test. It's kind of small, mini, dynamic food platform, but it's nothing more basic than getting a group of farmers and food businesses together to supply a public sector contract with locally produced food. So I think everywhere there's real pockets of innovation in that area, and it is obviously a sizable sector and a sizable sector for government to change. Thank you, Nigel. And your question next.
Thank you. My name's Hilda Mulrooney from London Metropolitan University, and thank you for a fantastic talk. But you mentioned the importance of knowledge exchange and brokering conversations with industry, for example. And I just wondered how you negotiate that, because there's so much criticism, especially of nutrition scientists having any dealing with industry, no matter how important that may be. They get huge stick in the press and they're accused of bias and so on. So I just wondered what your thoughts were about that.
You mean industry getting criticism or the academics?
No, the academics.
Yeah, I think, wow, that's a good, I mean, it is a very, I think you've got to declare any interests. I think that's important straight up. And then you've got to be so, I mean, and also the media, you've got to be so careful of the media because they misconstrue your exchange. So you need to get the comms absolutely right. I think to a certain extent, it helps having a non-disclosure agreement in place about certain work, so everybody keeps it under wraps until you're ready to publish it. So, and you need to agree with the people you're working with about the comms. And I think it's great impact for academics. I mean, I worked on the future of food strategy for the co-op. I worked with 3 Keel and worked with Mark Bartel at former partner at 3 Keel, who now works for Big Waste NGO in Australia. And we just love working with we brought academics into the roundtables. We work with all the different stakeholders in the co-op, the members, the store managers, the estates, supply chain managers, and you just learn so much. And I've never, myself personally, I've never come across it. I've never experienced any public criticism. I might experience criticism, I guess, if I applied for a grant. If I was working, if you apply for a grant, I've steered clear of applying for grants with certain foundations. That's where I've stayed clear from. Although I wouldn't discount it if the foundation was something like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, for example. But I do steer clear, if I can, of big corporate industry foundations. Yeah, thanks. I think. Keep going. Okay, I think I'm under orders now. I'm only 1 minute over time. So it would have been great to listen to more questions, and I'm sorry I was a couple of minutes over. But I just wanted to say, I have a great conference. Thank you very, very much for inviting me, and Angelina for introducing me. And there's so much brain power in this big tent that I'm sure by the end of the couple of days, led by the program, the network, you'll come up with some amazing ideas and build on some of the great work that you're already doing. Thank you very much indeed.